Good evening. Welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education in Bernards Township. The board has already saluted the flag in executive session. Mr. McLaughlin, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Beckman,
Here.
Ms. Schaefer,
Here.
Mr. Salmon,
Here.
Mrs. White,
Here.
Mrs. McCune,
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Here.
Mrs. Korn,
Here.
Mrs. Richmond,
Here.
Mr. Markarian,
Here.
Mr. Syatt,
Here.
Ms. Fox,
Here.
Mrs. Gray,
Here.
Madam President.
Thank you. I'd like to share with the public notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk. And a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting this virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted on the district website. The same directions were posted at our intended but unavailable meeting location. We welcome input from the public. Because this is a virtual meeting, public comment will be handled as follows. Email to btconnect@bernardsboe.com. Use public comment as the email subject or the start of a text first and last name and address. This is required for your public comment to be included. Please keep your comments brief if read aloud. No public comment will be accepted after item, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what the item is tonight, board forum. And with that, we are up to our student representative, Jimmy.
Oh, hi, everyone. I hope everyone's well. I think it's crazy that this is kind of like the fourth board meeting now I think we've had online. So, you know, like this, it's been pretty much 2 whole months, I feel like, since this all started. That being said, I think a lot of, you know, extracurriculars are adopting and moving online as well. I know now that all clubs have Google Classrooms. So, you know, at least with the clubs I'm involved in, we've been part of transitioning like the leadership moving forward. So hopefully everyone can reconvene, you know, in person next year. I know the dance team made like their own like group, like, you know, dance video in orchestra. We're doing like a joint, like everyone plays their online project. And last week I competed in a forensics tournament over Zoom. So seems like everyone's making changes. In student government, we're putting together our activities fair video. So they can find my replacement and elect that for next year. I do have an ask related to that, which is that maybe in a little bit, you guys can all wave together and I can steal that screenshot from the YouTube video and use it as recruiting material for Student Gov for next year. So that would be great. And then outside of that, yeah, we're just thinking about what we can do moving ahead. We've spoken to Ms. Hudock about, you know, whatever plans that could remain for graduation and doing our best, so.
Thanks, Jimmy. Any questions for Jimmy?
When do
Karen,
we do the
Richmond.
wave?
I think Karen has a question.
I just wanted to say congratulations, Jimmy. I read in the paper that you won a couple different awards in the last forensics tournament. So congratulations, very good.
Thank you. I don't know when we want to do the wave. I guess we can do it now. All right, cool.
Oh, you want 2 hands.
I don't know, whatever works for you guys. Cool. So hopefully that'll make its way to the incoming high schoolers soon.
All right, thank you very much, Jimmy. Take good care. Our next item is the board presentation on the distance learning survey results. I guess we're going to screen share.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see you after what I guess was a week off. some kind of a break. Like you, Jimmy, it's hard to believe we're still here. And I think it's our second or third time talking about distance learning. So I, again, was like, would have never guessed that this is what we would be doing this spring. But I am here with Mr. Colmer to talk to you about our current plans around distance learning and kind of the work we've been continuing to do. So I'm mostly here to introduce Mr. Colmer, who spent some time over the break analyzing some survey data, but I wanted to introduce it and kind of set up where it came from and where we plan to go from here. So first, I did want to say thank you again to all the teachers, all the administrators, all the staff, everybody who has worked so hard to make the last 5 weeks of instruction work as well as they have worked. The effort from everyone has been absolutely tremendous, and I know that they're all back ready to jump in again. So I appreciate their efforts, more than I could say on a presentation. So Grant, next slide. So just a brief, like, how did we get here? I just wanted a quick little review to remind everybody, on March 16th is when we launched distance learning, what we called phase 1. The week before, we just had a couple days notice that we might be out. And so we did 2 half-day in-services to put together what we thought would be a short-term 2-week plan. Our focus was to review previous content, focus on formative assessment, and not provide any formal grades. We learned during that first 2-week time that we would be extended. So we kind of re-envisioned what we were doing and decided, made some changes for what we called phase 2 that started on March 30th and concluded just before spring break, April 17th. With phase 2, we knew that now that this was going to be a longer endeavor, we wanted to really accomplish 2 things based on all that we've been hearing from both teachers and students and parents. And that would be to advance student learning, so move beyond review, advance our students' learning, meet learning objectives at each grade level and each course to the best that we could going forward. And secondly, to increase opportunities for interaction, because what we hear is that that is one of the biggest sort of things that people are missing, interacting with their peers, with their teachers, with each other. So those were our 2 primary objectives going into the second phase. We also resumed grading, made a few decisions relative to assessment. So we began grading student work again, and at the 6-12 level, made the decision to merge the marking period 3 and 4 grade books, primarily to provide teachers and students with an opportunity to make up for the lost time in marking period 3. So as we got ready for spring break on April 17th, on April 16th, as I'm sure you all know, Governor Murphy let us know that we would be closed through at least May 15th. So as we were headed to our break, our week off, we really wanted to get a sense of how it was going for everyone, for the teachers, for the students, and for the parents. And so the administrative team, with a lot of help from the coaches, put together surveys for all 3 groups. And we sent them out just before break, which was in some ways a challenging time to send out a survey because people were maybe gearing down for break. So we've kept them open, and we intend to keep them open for just a couple more days. And we'll show you the response rate we've had in just a few minutes. But it is our intention to take a look at this data and think about if there are any changes that would be beneficial to those goals I mentioned before, to the students, to the parents, to the teachers, and from their input that we're hearing. Okay. So like I said, these surveys will remain open through Wednesday. And what you're looking at tonight, that's a PDF version of the survey as of, I think, about 3 p.m. this afternoon. What you'll be seeing on the computer is a dynamic report. And so as people continue to submit responses to the survey, those results are automatically updated. So as those results continue to come in through Thursday, we will monitor those and spend the rest of the week analyzing the deeper level of content in the surveys beyond what we can show you tonight, the comments, the thousands of comments that we've had from students, teachers, and parents that we want to look at and really think about what they're telling us about our current learning plan. So before I hand this over to Mr. Colmer to show you his presentation, I just want to kind of say in summary to think about it in the context here that throughout the 5 weeks and going forward, everyone has really been amazing, stepped up to the students, the teachers, the staff, the administration. Nobody really signed up for this, didn't think we'd be doing this 3 weeks ago, and everybody is doing the absolute best they can, and I know they will continue to do that. You will see in the survey, as well as the anecdotal feedback we get through email, that it's overwhelmingly positive in people's opinion about how it's going. That's not to say we don't have some things to learn, but it is nice to see the appreciation being shown to our teachers and to our staff for the tremendous work they're doing. When we look at distance learning and we think about what we might be able to do now, maybe for the rest of the year, maybe next year, hopefully not, it's important, I think, to think of these two things. We are working on this as we go. There's no actual pedagogy that exists for K-12 distance learning and recreating what goes on in the classroom, but we are working to do that together as a team and with the input from all the stakeholders. And not knowing when it will end is just an added challenge. We don't know if we're planning for another 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, 3 weeks at this point, or for the rest of the year. So that's just an added challenge for us to think about how to best provide learning to students at this time. But having said that, in light of all of these challenges, we do all remain deeply committed to being reflective and thinking about what's working and thinking about what our students need, thinking about what our teachers need, and working to provide that to them in this format to make this the best experience that we can. So having said all of that, that kind of sets the stage for Mr. Colmer to share his presentation of the data, and he's going to walk you through it.
Mute. Can you hear me? That's great. So thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate Ms. Fox and Mr. Markarian for inviting me. If you know anything about me, it's that I love data, and that's either a good thing or a bad thing because it just obsesses over it a little bit, probably too much. And I'll probably say that as you go look at some bar graphs and some pie charts in here, it's overwhelming. So I'll try to take you through it as much as possible. So my goal was really just to try and contextualize some of the survey results that we collected just prior to spring break from parents, students, and teachers. Some anecdotal feedback as well. So this first one is just our response rate that we received from all three groups, parents, students, and teachers. So on the parent side, we were able to collect information from approximately 40% of our families of our student body population, and that results in about 30% of the Berners Township families who took the survey. So there's two numbers in there, and you can ask questions if whenever you need to, if it just needs to help clarify. But we got approximately 1,220 survey results, but since there were multiple students per family, the grand total of sort of summary data that we could look collectively as a student body is about 2,060 or so individual student cases. On the student side of things, we were able to collect data from approximately 1,200 students from all different grade levels, and you can see the breakdown according to the different schools on this chart right here. And from our K-12 staff, the chart below just represents the different response rates that we received from our teachers. So about 74% from our K-5 buildings, and 6 through 12, we had a response rate of 84%. And again, the survey was taken just before spring break, although I don't know where anybody went to other than maybe a computer in front of them. So that was part of it.
Great. Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Just the student responses, just to clarify, as we sent this survey out to students in grades 3, 4, and 5.
Correct. Yes. So these numbers here represented not K through 2. Decision was made, how much can kindergarten, first grade, second grade student really reflect on their distance learning experience. You know, if we were collecting that data from parents, then we thought that they would probably be filling out their survey one-to-one. So we thought we were capturing them even with the parent responses. So that's an overall picture of like, where did the data come from? What was in there? So the first question, as Ms. Fox just indicated, to meet some of the different objectives that we have, the two of them specifically originating from, are you advancing your learning, and some opportunities for us to increase some student interactions. We wanted to collect some data, and that's partly what I'm going to report out on here this evening. But that all starts with, if we can't do that and accomplish that due to your internet or your devices, then we really can't move forward on that front. So part of the first couple of questions that parents and students were asked was on the left-hand side. You'll see the question that parents responded to: do you have ample internet access in your home to participate in the distance learning program? And the majority, that big blue, is overwhelming yes, they do, with 99% of parents responding yes, and we only had 12 no responses of ample internet access that we have. So part of this is for us to use as feedback, but also to reach out to individual families if they placed their email address or something that we could help them move forward as we look forward to our plans. The other question that we had posed to parents was, do you have enough devices, desktops, iPads, laptops, call them whatever you want, something with a screen that you can connect to the internet for your home for each child enrolled in the school to work online simultaneously. And we're trying to parse out of, if we have conflicting scheduling meetings, let's say online meetings that parent or that teachers wanted to facilitate, are there enough devices in the home that if we create a structure that could support that, we want to have information about that. So there are some follow-up questions in there, but what we parsed out it to be was saying yes. About 95% of the parents reported that they do have enough devices, at least at home, to work online simultaneously. And that is juxtaposed against the student responses on the left-hand side, where they were asked, are you sharing a device? Although a different question, but still parsing out the same information. Are you sharing a device with a member of your family in order to participate in distance learning? And this is the pie graph is the overall chart that just shows that about 91% of the students are not sharing a device with other members of their family, which is important information for us moving forward, and only about 9% are. And this data then is broken down individually by school in terms of the responses that they have here. So some just looking at the data, making some inferences here. K-5, we see obviously a little bit deeper incline of saying, yes, I'm sharing a device with a brother or sister. I would probably expect that from this, versus maybe they're taking it from their older brother or older sister or some other family member that's in there. So it was just important information for us moving forward of how much can we push out to maybe at a K-5 level versus a 6 through 12 level, moving to not the next phase, but the continued phase of what we have. All right, any questions? I'm going to stop for questions after each slide. Is that okay? All right. So no interactions. Yeah, that's good. All right. Next one. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have prefaced this. There's a lot of data on the screen. It's overwhelming. I very much apologize, but I'm going to try to hopefully get you through it. If you are a data junkie like me, that's wonderful. You're seeing a bunch of bright and colorful on this pictures in terms of a donut graph and also some stacked bar graphs. So this slide shows information in terms of the self-reporting time students are spending on on schoolwork during this distance learning period. The question to students that was phrased was, on average, I estimate the time I'm spending on the schoolwork each day is, and the parents' question was, on average, I estimate the time my child is engaged in school-related work activities are. So we do recognize there's a difference between those. Our assumption is for, at least for 3 through 12, that this is a daily workload. And even though our questions did not specifically tailor that towards this parents' responses, we might just see some uptick of like 5 or more hours or something there because maybe they internalized that question differently. But the question was really phrased, and I think a lot of parents internalize it to mean each day. So that's how we're taking a look at this result. So the choices for students where I spend an hour or less, as you can see here, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours or more. And we just want to have a holistic approach of saying, where do you ballpark this on average? The left-hand side of this chart, or this whole table here, or slide, represents the parents' responses, and the right-hand side is all student summary of the responses. The donut graphs up top, I don't know why I made them donut and not pie charts. Maybe I was probably thinking about food at this point when I was looking at the data. I think so. The donut graphs provide an overall average, respectively, for all the different buildings that are in there, whereas the bottom parses it out by schools in terms of the parents, the students, and then it's sort of further broken down by grade level. And again, we're using this internally for us to metric some of our holistic data of how saying, can we move forward? What's too much? Is this too much? Are we doing the right thing? All just gathering data of what students are doing that we were helpful just to sort of say, what can we move forward with? So I do want to explain the stack bar graphs. If you are not familiar with a stack bar graph, there's unfortunately more of them in the slideshow coming up. So if I just want to take you through one case that's in here on the parent side. The stack bar graphs basically proportions out the responses by each category out to 100%. So as an example, on the parent side, there were 16 parents of WAM students reporting their students to spend one or more less hours, which represents 3.21% of the overall WAMs self-reported by the parent. That goes up to 123 responses for 2 hours, which is 24%, 3 hours, 175 responses, 35%, 24% for 4 hours, and 12% for 5 hours. This should total 100% for all of WAMs. Okay, it's sort of the one way in this display that I've sort of chosen to graph this out or chart it out to represent each school building individually. So some quick looking at the donut graphs up top just reveals that, and you can make your own inferences, but if I look at the data that's in here, I see that students in 6 through 12 are spending more time than students in 3 through 5, and that's shaded by the purple and the blue colors that are up here. So a larger segment of that donut is represented for 3, 4, 5 hours that are up there. And then if you even go look down below at the different grade levels, you do see a little bit more time in the 9 through 12 versus the 6 through 8. So we recognize there's a difference between 3 through 5. And then there's also a further difference between 9 through 12. And even it looks like 11th grade, I think we all know, is a very hard year. And it continues to be hard in distance learning that's in there. And that's not really a difference that we're sort of seeing. But the shift in overall workload does increase as you go throughout the grade levels. However, it's pretty consistent at the high school, and there's some expectations that we think we are setting for teachers, or they have set for themselves about the amount of time. And you know, the 2 and 1 hour are pretty consistent at the 9 through 12 level. There may be different times that students are spending 3 or more, or 5 or more hours, whatever that it is. Middle school seems to be pretty consistent, and then I know our grade level teams are really working hard to be collaborative in their approach, so I'm not surprised to see that increase that's in there. Questions on this one? This is a lot, so I apologize. If you have questions, please interrupt. Okay, so how's it going? Part 1. Well, I'm just titling that slide as an overall, how is it going? So Ms. Fox just mentioned we got some really positive feedback, and this is where the positive feedback really comes in terms of numbers. So as mentioned, we wanted to know from students and parents how distance learning was going. At the parent level, which is on the top hand side, this was broken down into having parents rate their overall experience on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being, I am very unsatisfied with the distance learning program being provided to my child. And 5 being, I am extremely pleased with the distance learning program being provided to my child. So the top left graph up here represents these results by the different grade bands, K through 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, and the overall percentage of those scores at each of the different ratings. So I've conveniently highlighted 3, 4, and 5 because that's what I wanted to spend time on, and grade out 1 and 2 because they do represent a very small portion of segment of students who are parents of students who are reporting that they are not satisfied. But overall, a overwhelming response of support and positive feedback we received from parents and students anecdotally. And that is then translated basically into these numbers that are in here. So the majority of the responses, greater than 60% across the board, were a rating of at least a 4 or better. And this truly, I think, speaks to our amazing staff and the wonderful job they've done given the circumstances, given the sudden change in their work life and their home life, and what they were able to produce and to continue to do. And on the right-hand side is the average parent rating for those, and we see, you know, pretty much it's a 4-star rating across the board for our different grade bands. So if I'm looking on Amazon, a 4-star rating, that's pretty great. And I think this is just a testament for what we were receiving anecdotally from emails. I know I was on at least a couple email chains of parents just thanking us, or I've been forwarded emails from parents, from teachers, just their overwhelming response of positivity towards this and their flexibility. And we're really happy to see that feedback just translated into something number-wise that's in here, and also validating some of our decisions that we've been grappling with over the past couple weeks and during this closure. So on the bottom are the student responses. They were not rated on a scale of 1 to 5. The questions that was phrased, it was a little different. The question was, overall, how is distance learning going? And the choices that they were given was not as good as I expected, about what I expected, better than I expected, and much better than I expected. So again, these results are broken down by grade level and by building. And so just some anecdotal evidence that we're sort of seeing that's in here. If you take a look at the responses, I think as the grade increases, it sounds like our upper level students had a pretty good idea about what was going to be expected of them. And that's highlighted by this yellow that continues to increase. But overall, we were really happy to see a good portion of the students reporting a better or much better than expected, which is in that green and blue colors on the left-hand side here or throughout this chart. And the trends continue within the individual buildings. And again, we were happy to receive the feedback, and is an incredible testament to our amazing staff and dedicated staff, and the support of the leadership that's in here, and also you, the Board of Education, supporting us as educators, trying to do the best that we can. So we're really very thankful for that. Any questions on this one? All right, then it's how it's going part 2. So part 2 of this story was really speaking to our second objective for students, which is, are students advancing their learning? And I just want to make a note that most of these graphs, except for the lower left-hand graph here, we collected from students at the 6 through 12 level. And that's because in 3 through 5, we didn't know if they could quantify, or we wanted them to quantify, are they advancing their learning in that type? We thought we were getting that from some anecdotal evidence from the teachers, but most of these graphs speak to 6 through 12, which is notated on here. So the top 2 graphs analyze data from students' responses to the question, I feel like I'm continuing to learn and develop my skills during distance learning. And students self-reported using a Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And that top left graph breaks this down, responses by grade level in 6 through 12. And the overall responses for students is, are they advancing their learning? Yes. It's right here. You can see it. They mostly agree with it. You know, the majority of students, around 60% at most grade levels, either are agreeing or strongly agreeing with that statement that they're advancing their learning. On average, about 20% of the students were neutral about that in that yellow band that's here. And about 10% of the students either disagreed or strongly disagreed. But as you can see, that varies by different few percentages that are in here, the different grade levels, and their feelings towards at the end of spring break. However, overall, we are excited to see that the majority of our students are progressing in their learning, and that's represented by this stacked bar graph right here. So I thought it was pretty interesting because we collected both analysis on how much time are you spending and are you advancing my learning? And one of the questions that popped into my head, which is odd, is just to sort of say, if you spend more time, or if you are self-reporting you are spending more time on distance learning, are you advancing your learning greater? And that's what this chart is supposed to sort of answer or parse out. And overall, the answer looks like is no. The time spent versus I'm learning more or I'm advancing my learning really doesn't parse out. And I was trying to reflect on this. I don't know what I anticipated when I analyzed it. Maybe I was expecting to say, oh, if you spend 5 or more hours, you were gonna like really, really knock it out of the park. But I think that this is a stronger case for what students and how our students are as students individually, right? If you go into a classroom, there are students who learn at different levels all across the board. And anybody who is an educator hearing this will know that. Certainly I can walk into a classroom and say, wow, there's a wide range of students. And that doesn't change with distance learning. So a student who spends 5 hours but is advancing their learning is still getting the same amount for a student who's spending 3 hours is still advancing their learning. You know, we do see a little bit of a dip, okay, in an hour or less, and we can parse that out. But overall, it doesn't matter if you're spending more because you, the individual student, are putting in the time that you need. And whether that time was dictated by a teacher, but those same lessons were going out and you as an individual had to sort of wrangle with the content that you were doing that, whether it was 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 hours. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective just to have. The bottom graph speaks to our second goal, which wanted to collect data on whether we are providing opportunities for students to know, to have interactions. So the bottom right-hand graph answers the questions we posed to students that said, my teachers are reaching out to me and creating opportunities for me and my class to conduct during distance learning. And overwhelming, you can see even at the different grade levels, 6 through 12, that we collected this, although it varies a little bit on the high school, that they strongly agree or agree that teachers are reaching out and they have opportunities to connect during this distance learning period. It increases slightly as you go up to 9 through 12, but for the majority of it, we're seeing an excellent sort of response rate of, are my teachers reaching out and creating this opportunity for me to advance my learning or for me to connect during this distance learning plan? The left-hand graph, it was asked through 3 through 12, and the question was, I know that there are supports available to me for my overall wellness and mental health during this challenging, such as, you know, seeking out a school counselor, student assistant counselor, a virtual relaxation room, which if you haven't checked out is just really wonderful. You know, there's some areas of growth perhaps at the, you know, some elementary schools or some other ways where we can push this out, but it looked like, yes, I know that there are supports available to me across the board, especially at Ridge and at WAMS and at the different grade levels or the different K through 5 buildings. But again, we're using this survey to perhaps be more reflective on our approach, and is there something better that we can do to sort of push out information to help students or to help teachers that are in there. So any questions on this one? This is really boring, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of stacked graphs in here. It's pretty and colorful. If that's what you get out of it, you saw some pretty donut graphs. Maybe that's it. So the last one we just wanted to report on is how are teachers doing during this time? So we wanted to provide some context about how are teachers managing the situation. So again, we sent out surveys to our teachers just before spring break, asking them the question, how do you feel about your distance learning situation? And there were 3 options that they had to choose from, which included, although this is not the ideal situation, I'm coping, which is in blue, or I feel good about it and I'm managing my new situation, that's in green, and I'm completely stressed and overwhelmed, pink. So the 2 graphs showcase the teachers' responses, which are broken down by building and at the 6 through 12 by department. So taking a look at the graphs, you can see there's a lot of blue and a lot of green. So that was great. We were excited not to see an overwhelming amount of pink that was in there, because then we really have to revise in what we were trying to do. But for the majority, the teachers indicated that, although this is not the ideal situation, they're coping with it, and the rest of the staff indicated that they're pretty feeling good about it. And I think as an educator or any professional probably thrown into a distance learning, virtual learning environment like this, I think a lot of our staff understand the need for what they're going to do or what they are doing. And even though it's not ideal, certainly that's there, they are coping with it and trying to make it the best of it. So we always teach our students to have that growth mindset and that flexibility. And I think we're all operating under that assumption right now. We're trying to find the happiness advantage towards how we can change our mindset towards different perspectives that are in there. So based on, and so just some overwhelming data we were happy to find out from teachers. So based on other feedback we collected, we're still analyzing some of the results in the comments. Teachers are feeling, they're coping with it, but they're definitely constrained. That we got the feedback from them by finding a balance between their home life and their new work life. And that's the biggest challenge that they are facing. I know I can speak to that myself as my little ones go down for bed right now. And the other largest feedback that we received was, the daily interaction or the daily communication that they had with students, making that personal connection when they greeted the students at the door and they wanted to say, hi, how are you? And we're all feeling that. So we were, teachers are humans too. And we recognize that just like their students, we are also feeling the same thing. So I think it's also important aspect that we recognize in our staff, the same thing that probably students and that students are feeling, the same things that teachers are feeling. So I know I said a few times, but I think it goes without saying that Ms. Fox also indicated the amount of dedication and the sacrifices of our teachers just have been making through their lives, through their families, to support our community and support, our students within the district is unfounded and continues to grow each day. So I know I'm personally proud to work alongside of the staff members that I've been just in charge of and overseen. And it's a credible opportunity just to work with the administrative team, to have their support, supporting our community, supporting our students. And that's what I got. So questions, I'll open up for questions. So I know it's a lot, and I apologize for all the stacked bar graphs.
That's great, Grant.
Grant. I liked the stacked bar graphs. I thought they were really great.
Some people like them.
Anybody have any questions for Grant
Just
before
a
we move
comment.
on?
Oh. I just want to say that I loved this grant. I said I'm an engineer, so I love bar charts and all this stuff. And I didn't have any questions, but I thought it was very interesting. I just want to let you know. And I was listening to the entire thing.
Not boring.
No, not boring at all. I just didn't really have any questions. It's all self-explanatory.
Yeah.
With your
Thank
great charts.
I just have a comment. I'm happy to see this last slide about the teachers and their wellness, because speaking to people in other districts and the stress level that I'm hearing about from some of my friends and the lack of support in their districts or coherence of what to do. So this this isn't a surprise based on what I've been hearing in our district, but it just reassures me that things are going as well as it seems like they're going, because we would have a lot more pink on there if it wasn't. So kudos to you guys for supporting everyone, and to our teachers and staff. It's pretty
Hey,
impressive.
Grant, can you unshare at this point just so we can kind of see everybody?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Rob and I agree with you on that. And I just want to, we're certainly concerned about the few pink responses we have. And that would be part of what we do going forward, is to trying to work with the ones who did report that way. But yeah, we're happy that while there are struggles, right, and we asked them for what those struggles and challenges were so we could work on those, they do feel like they're managing. And so we thought that was, and coping, not just managing. So, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Grant and Kristen. This was really great. I think it's very important to get the feedback, especially this time when we can't get it, audibly or in person. On the questions at the beginning about connectivity and devices, connectivity, I'm not sure how we can jump in there. I don't know if we have some ideas on that. It is a low percentage of people, but if there's something that we could do, I can't think of anything, but all options should be considered. On the devices side, do we have Chromebook loaners that can go out still to those folks?
Yeah, so Tim, on the connectivity, we actually have connected with families that didn't have any internet at all. We did get some mobile hotspots, if you will, to help some families out there. And reflecting on that question, some folks might have said that they didn't have ample, meaning that perhaps there were issues with speed or slowness or things of that nature, versus not having any. So we'd have to follow up separately to try to identify exact individuals and see if we could find a way to help them out, because we didn't ask for people to identify themselves in the survey. We wanted to kind of have a feeling of candid response and not feeling like we were collecting personal information on people. So we didn't do that. But, and we have kind of a standing order out there. Alex has had a steady stream, I would say 5 to 10 devices a week, roughly, right now, that he's been working with his team to allow parents to borrow or check out, if you will. And we've kind of left the message out there that if you feel as though you need a device, let us know and we'll help you. We haven't made a kind of this intentional point of trying to say everybody must have their own machine. We've kind of let families let us know, hey, if it's working for you, great. If you're sharing and it's not a problem, great. If you're running into problems, let us know and we'll help issue a device.
And there's a discrepancy between whether the parents said there was enough devices and the students with the younger grades. I can tell you, my son put that he has to share a device because he's using someone's old laptop, but he has his own device. So the way he chose to answer that question makes it look like he's sharing during school time, and he's not. You know what I mean?
Right.
So. I just wanted to say thank you to Kristen and to Grant, and share that a couple people actually called me, parents specifically, to say that they were very appreciative of being asked. And I know some people were interested in, following up by watching tonight. I can see we have actually a good number in the audience tonight. So that probably speaks to the interest in this survey. So thank you both.
And did you find that we have, I know it's only been a day, so it's hard to know after people have come back that they're like, oh, look, if they weren't paying attention before, was there another reminder? And have you noticed people filling it out like today more, or?
Yeah, we're continuing to get responses. So we sent out a reminder. I sent it out at the end of last week, and we will leave it open through Wednesday. So we will, add to those numbers as we do the analysis.
Any other questions about the presentation? Okay, if we have no questions about the presentation, no additional questions. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Yeah, so we have a couple items on the agenda for the board to vote on. They are not particularly new items. In fact, Ms. Fox described both of these items at a prior board meeting. However, as is kind of been the norm over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, things are constantly changing. And one of the things that changed that the Department of Ed asked us to do was to have our plan board approved. So this is kind of a formality. I need to show the Department of Ed that the board approved the plan that we're using. These plans have been posted on the district website for all to see, and they continue to be there. They basically describe how it is that we tasked the different staff to engage in the distance learning program with the students. So we kind of need to check this box and make sure that DOE has the approval that they're requesting. So I guess we need a motion and a second.
Mrs. Richmond and Mrs. McCune? And a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman? Ms. Beckman?
Oh,
He's muted.
You're muted. Thank you. You're still muted. Now
oh,
you're unmuted.
it says, okay, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. So at this point, we are up to public comment. Ms. Fox, do we have any public comment on agenda items?
I thought I was muted. We have, so we're doing agenda items now. We have 2 on agenda items. Don't think the third one is an agenda item. So the first one, Desiree Noland, 88 Harrison Brook Drive. I don't see the message. Oh, is there a breakdown by grade for the K-5 parent responses? That's the first question.
Grant, you're muted.
No, I was reading the question back in my head. Is there a breakdown for the K-5 parent responses? I think I may just need in terms of what?
So the ones we presented, so they weren't broken down by the parent responses. Oh, I think actually they said, there was a follow-up question on how they rate distance learning overall. She followed up.
Okay, yeah, we band them together by K through 5 and 6 through 8 and 9 through 12. We're looking internally sort of by building wise of, what was the average score. And overall it was an average of a 4 for each of the buildings that was in there. Granular data for grade level, for how distance learning, we could analyze it, but I don't have it here, and we did not do that analysis.
But we could. So I think it's just one of the things that was going to require some more depth. And so we could certainly take a look at that this week. I believe it was just the way the parent survey was organized, right? There were 1 response per family, but parents were responding for potentially multiple children at different grade levels. So it would require just a different type of analysis. And so it's not that we can't do it. We just hadn't.
We have to look to, well, I don't want to say for sure whether or not we can or can't.
Right.
We need to take a look at it. I'm not
Correct.
sure that we can disaggregate it that clearly, but we can
Right.
take a look at it.
Exactly. We can look at it.
We can look at it. we'll be back, same time, same channel next Monday, but we can take a look.
So the second comment, I believe, is a non-agenda item, so I'm going to skip that until later.
That's
Okay.
fine. We could do that at the next public
And then
comment.
the third comment, although there was no address given, there is a name in the email. So Elizabeth Bridgman asked, why aren't teachers connecting with students on a daily basis?
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, I have probably different things I could say in response to that question. Certainly it is one of the reasons for the survey to try to drill in, and that's some of the finer level detail and analysis we're continuing to do this week, some of the open-ended comments and looking at what teachers are reporting that they're been doing and what students are saying they've been involved in. So that is part of our continued analysis to look a little bit further into those like micro details. I would say that I believe teachers are connecting with students on a daily basis. So it kind of might vary by teacher. So, you know, there's not a lot of detail there. So I believe, you know, it's hard to answer that question generally like that. I believe there are teachers who are doing that, but they're also doing it in a variety of different ways.
And in some cases, you have alternating A/B days too.
Correct. At the 612 level, we are alternating A day, B days. And so there's a mixture of direct instruction and answering questions and giving feedback. So there's just a variety of different ways that the teachers have set up their classes and their courses. But I don't think I couldn't answer that without having more specific information. And I guess I would say to any parent who thinks that there's no connection or is not enough connection, we did ask for that in the survey and we are going to look into that, but you can also sort of reach out and get some more specific information from an administrator or from the teacher directly first. And then, you know, like, what is your plan? What is your, I had a parent email today, just anecdotally, where the parent was explaining their response on the survey and saying that after submitting the survey, they discovered that in fact a teacher had been offering calls every day and they just had missed it, kind of in trying to keep up with emails. And so that's an organizational challenge as well. So, you know, there's a lot to that question, but that is definitely part of our work looking at that.
Right. And that's consistent with some of the messaging I've tried to put out there, which is, you know, please start by talking to the teacher and trying to understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish and making sure that you're in tune with the communication that they are putting out there, because there is a lot of things coming into email inboxes, and it can be easy to lose track of what the teacher is trying to accomplish and how the teacher's trying to connect with the kids.
And just as a little public service announcement, in the your message, I think it was last night, Nick, or no, maybe it was Friday night, you included a video, a PowerPoint of some tips on how to better manage all of that email through both Google Classroom, but also through Gmail and creating filters and labels that could help you with that organizational challenge, both from a parent and a student perspective.
Right. I sent another email.
You sent another email on how to manage emails.
On how to manage emails. Yes, I did that. I apologize for all our viewing listeners.
So those are the agenda item comments.
Okay, please save the others for when we get to the next public comment.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam
Kristen.
President.
Thank you. So our next item is approval of minutes. If I could have a motion. Mrs. Wooldridge and Mr. Salmon. And a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. Now we have the Finance Committee report, Mr. Salmon.
The Finance Committee met on Wednesday, April 15th. The first item up for discussion was the Aramark Facilities and Food Services update during the school shutdown. So in terms of food services, Chris Deach from Aramark has a limited staff at Cedar Hill to produce weekly lunches for the 79 students that receive free and reduced lunch. Pickup is provided on Mondays and Thursdays, and cafeteria aides are doing deliveries. There are 7 families picking up lunches and 43 lunches are being delivered. Approximately 20 families are not getting lunches, and we have not heard, the district has not heard from them. It is possible that some of these students are no longer in the district, but Mr. McLaughlin is still working to for other reach out efforts. The district the district is going out to bid for a food service contract in July. Normally, in a normal world, the potential bidders are invited for a pre-bid walkthrough of the facility, but that's not possible with the school closure, obviously. So Chris Deach from Aramark did a walkthrough video that can be provided as part of the bid package. The bid package will also include information about the cafeteria expansion at Ridge High School and options such as increasing vending machine hours, remote ordering, and other concerns that were raised by students. The contract will be for 1 year with the option to renew. In addition to food service, there was a facilities update from Aramark. All maintenance and ground staff are in and working. The backlog in the work order system has been substantially reduced. The number of current work orders is 242 as of the week of April 20th, which is down from the late February count of 350. The building crews are bagging items in lockers for cleaning the lockers and making items easier to pick up if that should be necessary. Mr. McLaughlin and the Aramark staff are looking into enhanced hygiene and cleaning protocols that will be necessary when school resumes. Currently, Mr. McLaughlin and Aramark are investigating automated hand dryers and/or automated paper towel dispensers, as well as light-powered automated faucets and automated soap dispensers for all restrooms, as well as automated hand sanitizer dispensers in all classrooms and common areas. The maintenance reserve is fully funded at $4.4 million, which would be used to pay for these projects. In terms of Aramark staffing concerns, when school resumes, Mr. McLaughlin anticipates adding 3 to 4 additional custodial staff to implement enhanced cleaning protocols such as major disinfecting and cleaning overnight and cleaning heavily contacted surfaces multiple times throughout the school day. The additional staff would likely cost about $100,000 per year. Mr. McLaughlin also provided a budget update. The district submitted its budget package for 2021 to the Department of Education. The public meeting on the budget is set for May 4th, 2020. The advertisement for the meeting will say that the meeting is being held at WAMS, but there will be a link to the live stream. The district has created a unique email address for the public to request copies of budget documentation. Rod, do you have that email address that you can read out?
He's muted.
Yeah, Rod, you're muted. Okay, well.
Sorry about that. What email address are you asking for?
The email address that we created so that the public can request copies of the budget if they want it.
I do not have that present here. It was advertised in the newspaper on the 23rd.
Got it.
So I don't have it to read out here.
Okay. The third item up for discussion was the Somerset County Ed Services Commission transportation contract for next year, as well as some legislation regarding payment of vendors for this school year. In the fourth item that was discussed was a brief health benefits update provided by Mr. McLaughlin. He stated that we have claims data now through April 12th. During March, there was a large increase in prescription numbers, likely because many people were increasing orders of prescriptions and/or getting 90-day orders through the mail. However, through the first 12 days of April, the prescription numbers have decreased and the district is still on track to be approximately $588,000 over budget for 1920 for prescription data. The agenda items on tonight's agenda, numbers 1 through 3 are standing items, and number 4 and 5 are resolutions to appoint advocate, which the district has been using for some time now as our facilities consultant and food services consultant for the 2020-21 school year. Please let me know if you have any questions.
I think we should do a motion now and motion in a second.
Yes, could we have a motion, please? Mrs. White and Mrs. Korn? And a roll. Oh, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Salmon or Mr. McLaughlin? Okay, I don't see any questions. If we could have a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. The next item is the Personnel Committee report. Just bear with me for 1 second. I have it open here. So the Personnel Committee met on April 17th. And the first item, Mr. Syed gave an update. Well, he described how he was communicating with the Department of Education to work through how teacher evaluations will be handled given our current circumstances. So he is working with them. Then there was a request for some additional work time for some revision to the summer to the freshman orientation program at Ridge High School, and that work would be done over the summer. So the committee discussed and supports that effort. That would require 2 staff members to work for 5 days to fine-tune the plan and develop a contingency plan if needed. And there was also a brief discussion, not really discussion, overview of the new legislation, A3904, which basically provides that all collectively bargained stipends will be paid to staff, so which was something that had already been addressed relative to coaches. And beginning, as Jimmy mentioned at the earlier in the meeting, clubs are all meeting, and seems like everything's working virtually. And then everything else was something, relating to a confidential staff member. So that's it. The committee will meet again on May 15th. Does anyone have any questions? Could we have a motion? Mrs. Schaefer and Mrs. Beckman? And a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. Our next item is the Policy Committee report. Mrs. Korn, do you have the Policy Committee report?
I do. We have, I'll read the report first, right? And then because we have a couple of.
All right, so can we have I think really Mr. Krug prefers this if we do this, request the
First.
motion, do the report, and then ask questions and take a
Right.
vote.
Okay.
So Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Richmond for the motion, and then your report.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get this. So the policy committee met virtually on April 13th. There was a discussion. We discussed the appropriate use of email communication, whether we should have so in order to manage the communication between parents, teachers, and students, particularly when it comes to email, we discussed about creating a separate policy speaking to the proper use of email. So the policy could include guidelines and responsibilities when it comes to emails between parents and teachers response time, appropriate use of email, and repercussions for email abuse. For example, having your email blocked if you're found to be abusing the email. I'm going to create a policy that addresses a philosophy on email communication, including the best practices for email use, how to handle challenging situations through email, and when it's time for telephone communication when email just doesn't work anymore. Spell out email etiquette how staff and or parents or the public are expected to conduct themselves through email. The new policy would be similar to the visitor policy we have with the schools. The email abuse would be handled by the principal. In the first instance, the principal would reach out with a warning. In the second, the superintendent would reach out with a warning. And then in the third instance, the email address would be blocked or suspended, or however it's decided that that's going to be taken care of. But the policy is still a work in progress and under discussion still. And there was the homework. It's a regulation 2330. It's just, there's language in the regulation regarding tests that was cleared up to state that tests and quizzes may be administered to students beginning the third day back from a recess period. That was the only change in that. It was revised a little bit. So our first reading, we have policy 2200 curriculum content, which is mandated and revised. And this was including the 2 new statutes that were recently approved and codified, the financial literacy instruction, and also the history of disabled and LGBT persons in middle and high school curriculum, including policies, procedures pertaining to inclusive instructional material. These statutes address issues that must be in the district's curriculum or the New Jersey student, I can't even think of the words. Yes, the SLS. So they are included in the section of the statutes that address curriculum requirements related to the health and well-being of students. So originally, Strauss-Esme had included the statutes in health and phys ed, but upon further review, the mandates were moved to the curriculum content policy, which is a better fit for these statutes. The first reading also is for the regulation of 5200. It's attendance, absences, and makeup time. Students are allowed to make up missed work for each 1 day of absence, but no less than 2 days. The second part was added for clarification and to match the homework policy. And for second reading, we went through all these at the last meeting. It's the domestic violence, postnatal accommodation, administration of medication, the supervision of construction, the school year, the school day and school closings, and the reporting of potentially missing or abused children. Those are all for second reading.
No changes from first.
Nothing, no, they're all the same. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions on anything there?
If we have no questions, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
I don't remember.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. Our next item is the curriculum committee report. Mrs. Richmond?
I apologize in advance. This is a rather long report. We went through a lot of content. And Ms. Fox, please feel free to jump in if I misstate anything. The curriculum committee met on April 3rd. We went through a presentation of K-5 science. Mr. Misiak demonstrated some of the amazing technological activities that the teachers are doing with the students through distance learning to teach relevant lessons and keep the students engaged. As far as a curriculum overview, our current program is spiraling grade band specific program, meaning that specific kindergarten standards, first grade, second grade, and so forth. The only standard that is not grade specific is the engineering design strand, which is broken down into 2 bands, K2 and 3-5. The science kits used in district align with grade level next generation science standards, which were adopted by New Jersey and became New Jersey student learning standards. Earth science, life science, and physical science is touched upon in every grade. Some repeat every year, some skip and spiral back. Most of the discussion surrounded the science lab kits from Knowing Science, which were purchased in fall 2016 and fall 2017. Unfortunately, these kits are very problematic. The teachers are finding that the kits are poor quality and are breaking. Some are missing pieces. Many called for the use of food, which was especially problematic for teachers and students with food allergies or sensitivities. Some only had demo kits rather than 4 to 5 table labs. And teachers were having to stagger the lessons to rotate the kits through the grade, so the students could not do hands-on learning. The bottom line is that teachers are dissatisfied with the kits and are spending too much time fixing or supplementing or modifying them. In terms of technology, the teachers still need more Chromebooks. Often the software doesn't run properly because there are so many versions across the 4 elementary schools. In terms of curriculum, since Knowing Science put out their kits early before the standards were fully adopted, the kits do not identify phenomena, an essential component for the next generation science standards, and the hook, it's the hook for the inquiry-based instruction. Well, the group has done their best to identify those phenomena. Now they're 5 years out from when they were purchased. Other vendors have made leaps and bounds with amazing inquiry-based instruction. As the department continues to vet vendors, they will continue to look for phenomena-based lessons and programming. Mr. Misiak's recommendations are: 1, technology improvements. We need to increase student access by resurrecting the technology steering committee to design a tech recycling plan to streamline the Chromebook fleet maintenance to keep the same building, same grades on the same platform. 2, update the current kits with ones better aligned with next generation science standards. The plan would be to have at least 1 teacher per grade to do the reviews. The group also wants representatives from special education to be involved to make sure that the materials are appropriate for those students. And 3, PD. Elementary teachers want to continue with the science assessment committee, but they want to open up the kits, train on the kits, run the labs, and get really familiar with the experiments that they're doing with the kids and leveraging pull-out sessions, K-5 department meetings, and half-day professional development days. These recommendations collectively need to be looked at and will have various impacts on the budget. What can be salvaged and what can be purchased to evolve it to where it needs to be. We then talked about K-5 report cards, trimester 2 progress reports. A letter went out to the parents about how they're going to handle trimester report card. There is one change highlighted in bold. There will not be letter grades for reading, writing, or arithmetic in grades 4 and 5. The indicators will still be scored in a way that it always has. Teachers will still have the ability to provide feedback. In the rest of the letter, Ms. Fox talked about a new format and how it's going, and approach to the assessment in general needing to be a little bit more formative in nature, with feedback about student participation and engagement, and de-emphasis on the achievement and how the student performed on tests. Also in the letter is that COGAC scores are in Genesis portal and available for parents to start viewing for grades 2 and 3. This is kind of old news, but offsite, option 2 offsite process, Mr. McCarran shared out how option 2 information on April 2nd, 2020, and his SOS message. So everybody should be up to date for period 4. Genesis marking period merger, Ms. Fox and Mr. Colmer just went over that in their presentation. STEM 8, the application process for the STEM 8 elective has been revised due to the closure. There were 76 applicants and all were emailed a virtual task on April 15th, 2020 to complete and submit by Friday, May 1st. The task involves the design of a complex system similar to a Rube Goldberg machine. Students will be building the machine but submitting a presentation that explains their design. All of the applicants will then participate in a virtual interview conducted by a STEM 8 team of teachers and administrators. 40 students will be selected for the STEM 8 elective upon these 2 measures. We talked a little bit about honors criteria and placement and what that would look like. But since that meeting, I think that Ms. Fox will say that they've made some new decisions and that we'll be talking about it at the BOECC on Friday. Impact on summer programs as stated, honors criteria, STEM 8, Quest, these were all things that the teams were thinking about. And a committee member asked about how distance learning is working out in special education. Ms. Fox said they are able to make the necessary modifications and where adjustments need to be made. They're working with families to address each situation. Senior internship, there are about 4 or 5 students that can continue their senior internship virtually. Some are in district, some at the elementary school, 1 in IT, and there's a possibility of incorporating some tutoring virtually as some to continue their internship. There are also a couple of local businesses that can have students work virtually. Some we don't know if they'll be returning to school. The other senior internship program might not, the one that is for after APs, that might not be able to run. And I think Mr. Brown was deciding relatively soon about that. The last thing we talked about was platooning. We're really in our first year of the common model in the 4 buildings. Last year, in order to plan for implementation of the common model, the 5th grade team met quarterly during the year and again over the summer. The team met this year in February. They intend to do it again at the end of the year, as well as to look at any data, how it's going, and discuss any changes that they have that should be implemented next year. The objective for 2 years ago was to ease transition into middle school. In 5th grade, content becomes more complex, so by allowing teachers to specialize in fewer content areas gives students richer education. Nowhere in the goal was there a desire to increase scores, but certainly we don't want to see them decrease as a result of platooning. Qualitatively, surveys of students and teachers were given over 2 years. The 6th grade teachers saw an increased emotional readiness of the students. The students were fairly consistent in their response for readiness. Of course, they're still worried about middle school things, lockers, academics, friends. Academically, the teachers felt students were slightly more prepared because of platooning. Students were fairly consistent with the same response. Many teachers felt that the platooning had helped, but still students need more independence, time management, perseverance, things that are all going to be that go along with development and maturity. The next question had to do with students' ability to develop relationships with teachers and students. Teachers saw an increase in that ability. What do sixth graders typically struggle with when they enter WAMs? This is a particularly useful question for the fifth grade teachers to look at as many adjustments for next year. Organization, study skills, and time management, work independently, getting used to an increased academic workload. The size of WAMs is not easily overcome. And no matter what we do with the kids, I'll come with 4 different buildings into one really large middle school. So the transition is always going to be something to contend with. The teachers were asked what they most worry about, and it said the same: homework, grades, friends, getting in trouble. Were they excited about switching classes, making new friends in lockers? Year 1 doesn't tell us a lot, but unfortunately will be more challenged to analyze assessment data with the loss of the NJ, SLA, and map testing because we're out of school. I can't do that. They're already planning to take a hard look at the minute allocations in the subject areas. Reading time was decreased as a result of increasing time in science and social studies. They want to look carefully at the impact of this and see if there's any sort of curriculum writing that can be done to address it. And they're always looking to improve communications with parents. A lot. Sorry, Marie, with all that. Is there any questions?
Okay, no questions? Do we still have Ms. Fox? Nothing from the public on anything curriculum related?
No.
Okay. So then our next item is the Wellness Committee report.
Wellness has not met. We are meeting on Thursday.
Oh, good to know. Forgot about that one. Okay, so then our next agenda item is the Liaison Committee reports. Does anyone have one? Okay, I see Mrs. Korn shaking her head no, and Mrs. Richmond and I don't have anything from Ed Services. Okay, so then the next item is public comment on non-agenda items. So Ms. Fox?
Sure. Let me open this question. Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. I am Ann Lauridsen from 76 Blackburn Road. I am concerned that the BOE's plans to move forward with the 2.9 million addition to Ridge High School at this time is fiscally irresponsible. With so many unknowns about the future, why is the BOE rushing ahead? I think it is fiscally prudent to hold on to school monies to fund any possible future shortfalls from state funding or anticipated outside income. The Ridge High School addition is not a necessity. It is a luxury to accommodate block scheduling that requires only one lunch period during the day. The social distancing protocols currently in effect will have a lasting impact in school logistics in the future. One lunch period with the entire population of Ridge High School, students, administrators, and teachers coming together at once, I imagine, would no longer be possible. I envision our current system with multiple lunch periods becoming the model for New Jersey schools in light of social distancing protocols as one possible solution. With so many unanswered questions and so many changes to our daily living practices on the horizon, I think the BOE should halt the Ridge High School addition at this time. Let the dust settle, get your mandates from the state health department, see if state funding is cut, and see if anticipated outside income is realized. Put this $2.9 million project on hold. The taxpayers in this town are hurting. Every taxpayer dollar must be used only for necessities, not luxury capital improvements. Thank you, Ann Lauridsen.
Ms. Fox, is that the only non-agenda public comment?
Well, there was a follow-up question from Elizabeth Bridgman, who asked an earlier question. She asked, why aren't teachers connecting with students? She asked a follow-up question.
Okay.
Good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you could share that, and then maybe Mr. Markarian can decide what he wants to address.
Sure. So she said, what I want to understand is why are teachers from surrounding schools teaching live on a daily basis? Why isn't this district doing the same? What is the expectation for teacher-student connection?
Okay, so was that the full comment, Ms. Fox?
That was.
Okay, great. So if Ms. Gray wants, are there any other public comments?
No, she sent one other follow-up saying, why aren't teachers connecting with students on a daily basis? So I think that's a repeat. So that's
Okay.
it. That's it.
Okay. So if we want to close public comment, then if there aren't any new ones, then I will respond to what I can here.
Okay, so then if we'll close public comment.
Okay. So with that said, thank you, Ms. Gray and Ms. Fox. So the first comment with respect to the cafeteria, I think I just want to clarify, first of all, that it's not a planned addition. The plan is to renovate within the existing footprint, to renovate the aged cafeteria into a new facility that would be able to accommodate the necessary food production to allow for the rotating schedule that we've been working on, the rotating drop. And I certainly want to make it clear that it's not an addition. There's no new footprint. The building footprint is not being expanded. It's really more accurate to describe it as a renovation of the existing kitchen production that exists at Ridge High School. And I certainly wouldn't describe it as anything that's being rushed into. Quite the contrary, the board has been extremely thoughtful in this process about looking at what food production facilities might best contemplate the solution to allow for a unit lunch and the rotating drop schedule. If you recall, we actually changed course because we haven't been rushing, and we took the demographer's update and decided that we didn't need to add a second food production facility. And in fact, the board adjusted based on that information and that report to only renovate the existing space and not to add on to the footprint of the building. Furthermore, those plans are, again, not being rushed. They're being worked on thoughtfully, and I don't see us being in a situation where we're making any sort of snap decision. I do think that it's prudent to be thoughtful about any multi-million-dollar decision, and I'm confident that the board will take its time in making a good decision in light of all the information that's available at the time. Certainly, the economic future is uncertain. It's always uncertain. It's probably more uncertain now than it might typically be. I think we all know why, given the closure. So I do think that the comment is valid from that perspective. But we have to work with the information that we have. Right now, we don't have any new information. I feel pretty good that by the fall, well before a time that we might award this contract, we will have more information. So we have time to make a appropriate decision in terms of the commitment that the board's already made to develop the project, to design it and put it out to bid. That commitment's already been made, and a large part of those funds have already been committed to making progress. So certainly there will be ample time to review the economic climate and environment before awarding any sort of contract on the project. And I'm sure the board will be thoughtful about that. With respect to the connection between the student and the teacher, I would echo Ms. Fox's sentiments prior to the second public comment on the issue, which is, I think it's really important that parents talk to teachers, understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to accomplish it and when they're connecting with the students. And the way that the teachers are connecting with the students is not patently uniform across the board. So I don't think I could give an answer to the question that would be meaningful from that perspective, because teachers do have some flexibility and latitude in how they are connecting with the student. But we are constantly looking at that issue. Ms. Fox can tell you that I'm talking to her about that every single day, probably driving her crazy.
I would add, she asked about the expectation of teachers and making connections. Part of our early decision making came from the fact that we are not one-to-one, and so not being able to expect certain numbers of live meetings spoke to the fact that some students are sharing devices, some students don't have devices.
Sure.
Students can't get them until the end of the day when somebody's finished with them, and so that was a part of our early decision making. So certainly this new information we feel might allow us to think about that again. But that is where part of that came from. And like Mr. Markarian said, by grade level and by course, they made decisions about how they were going to deliver content and provide feedback. And it varies quite a bit, across all of the grades and all of the contents. And so it's not possible to give like one answer. But we have asked teachers in the second phase, going from the first phase to the second phase, to increase the amount of interaction that they were having with students. And so we'll continue to work on that.
Thanks. Mr. McLaughlin, I didn't mean to cut you off with respect to the question about the financial issues associated with the capital projects, but I don't know if you want to speak to the way capital funds are arranged within the budget process and the interplay between capital reserves and the general fund, and also the kind of notion that there are historical examples where capital funds or other reserves have been used really by mandate to fund school budgets, and to the extent that those funds are committed to projects, we did see an example in recent history where districts had more capability to retain their reserves when it was demonstrated that they were in fact committed to a particular project. So I don't know if you want to add to what I said, but I certainly want to give you the opportunity.
Sure. I think a couple of things that I'll reiterate what you said. First, the timeline that we're on with respect to the capital projects for next summer, and there are two. We've only talked about the cafeteria, but there's also the William Hannon Science Labs renovation project, is such that we would not be awarding the contracts, as you pertinently pointed out, until late in the fall, at which time we should have some good sense from the state of New Jersey about any changes in funding for the year. As of right now for this year, and we're into the month of May pretty much at the end of this week, we have not received any notification about not receiving funding for the remainder of this year at the anticipated levels. So we've already received the April funding. The May funding remains, and normally the June payment is pushed off until August anyway in the next appropriation. And it's unlikely, with the year having been ended as of July 30th, or June 30th, that we would see it retroactively cut. I won't say it's impossible because the legislature has the ability to do almost anything as long as it's constitutional. But that's not likely. Is it possible that we're going to see a reduction next year? Sure, that's the question that's on every administrative teams and every business administrator's mind, and has been on my mind for the last 6 weeks, and why we were, scurrying here and there to see what the best is that the state would allow us to do, despite some of the laws that it's passed recently, to potentially, curtail some costs for which we're not receiving services currently. That all said, with respect to the various reserves that districts have or don't have, as you rightfully pointed out, we are not funding either of these projects from the district's current operating funds. And you also correctly pointed out that there is a historical precedent in the past when the state of New Jersey has come along and cut funding to say that first they want you to look to your current operations. That's usually been the triage approach. If you can't address the cuts, depending on when they tell you about the cut is also important. So if they tell you late in the fiscal year, then the cuts have to be more draconian in a way to make up the amount of lost funds. If they tell you at the beginning of the year, you have the ability to spread that over, entire 12-month period, you have a lot more flexibility and the impact can be significantly less. Again, this remains to be seen what the legislature is going to do. We won't know until this summer. But as far as the reserves are concerned, you're correct. They can tell you specifically that if you can't make it up from current operational resources, that you can then look to your various reserves. And every time they've done it in the past, they basically give you a protocol for which reserves and in what order. To the extent that you actually have a signed contract with a contractor, I believe that protected or gave some protection in the past to those funds. I think for things that have not been awarded yet, there is some question as in the state's mind as to whether or not you have a legal obligation to comply with that, basically, or not. So I think that speaks to your question about, and I'm reiterating essentially what Nick's already said in terms of the funding. Our district is not relying on the current operations. Could we be called upon to go to our reserves? I think it would depend on the magnitude of it. I'm not really certain that a magnitude of even 25% reduction in state aid, you have to keep in mind that while that would be a significant amount of money for us, is not a significant amount of money compared to what other districts that get 40 to 60% of their aid from the state on. We get roughly $5 million in change from the state out of a $100 million+ budget. So, are they going to reduce us back to what the state aid level was, prior to the governor's message being this year's? Because we did get an increase for next year right now of $651,000. If they decide to take us back, let's say $1 million, we only really are looking at making up, say, $400,000 from the current year's budget levels. So I just want to give some perspective on it. And this is purely conjecture at this point because we have no idea what the state will or will not do. And as we get further on and closer to the late summer, we're going to know what the state's going to do and whether that really should have any impact on our operations at all, or whether we can sustain, because we did make and the board has been very judicious in its oversight of the public funds, and therefore we do have reserves that we can rely on, and we have structured it in our budget in a very conservative way, and so we have flexibility. That's what
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Does anybody have any more questions for Mr. McLaughlin on this subject?
I just had a comment. I think what Mr. McLaughlin is saying is it's not fiscally irresponsible for us to do the project because we have, been very careful, planning for capital projects over the years. And we've done other big projects like the HVAC, and we have old buildings and things need to get replaced at some point. this cafeteria is super, super old at Ridge. It's not like we can just leave it there forever and never, upgrade it. So, and it's been something that has been put off because we knew we were looking at doing something different at Ridge. And so that's why it wasn't upgraded, 3 years ago or some other time, because we've been working on this project. And I had a comment about the first question, the first public comment too, about the teacher contact. I think what Ms. Fox just said about how, we deliberately planned not to have kids have to be logged in at a certain time of day, for large blocks of time. I've heard of so many parents saying that they really appreciate that we didn't do that, that some of the districts who have required kids to be logged in at certain periods, it causes a lot of other problems. I know a lot of kids are helping, with their younger siblings schooling during the day because their parents are both working remotely, and then they're doing their own work later in the day, and it would be very stressful if everybody had to be logged in at the same time. So I think, there's a fine balance, I think, you know what I mean? But I think I'm glad we didn't rush into requiring something like that.
And to piggyback on that, the cafeteria, like you said, even if we weren't going to go to the schedule, the drop schedule, would still need to be renovated. It just wasn't, it doesn't work for, it was built for 400 kids, so.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that's being irresponsible. I think that's just, it just needed to be done. It just is being done now. And we need to do it either way. So also with the school, with all the kids on school, for my example, me and my husband are both working from home. My daughter from college is she's doing her college courses here, plus 2 kids from the high school. 1 high school and middle schooler. I can't imagine if people had to be on, like, the Wi-Fi is like, Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. You only have so much you can do. And it is good that you don't have to be on constantly, like always do, like the Zoom meetings are always on with the teachers all the time, like are forced to do it, because you kind of have to spread it out. You have to, it's not that easy, especially if you don't have, if your house, it's hard to find a place for everybody to go where it's quiet or where you're not going to be interrupted. It's just, it's a challenge. And I do appreciate that we weren't, I've noticed that my children the teachers are always like, if you need me, reach out to me. If you need to talk to me, it's encouraged to do that. Cause I said, are you doing a meeting? No, if they need us, if we need them, they're there for their hours for help and stuff. So, it's hard because it's not the same for everyone. And I think we're doing the best with making it flexible enough for all different kinds of learning.
Okay, I think we're up to item 19, Madam President.
I'm very sorry. Case in point of what Jen was just talking about, for some reason, my connection has been cutting in and out, and I really haven't had a lot of problems with Zoom, or I also use Microsoft Teams, and I really haven't had a lot of problems, but for some reason tonight I am. So could imagine it to be very stressful if teachers expected a lot of get there at this time, you're going to be missing, something, if there's other ways to accomplish the same. Anyway, yes, we are up to board forum. Board members, is there anything you'd like to talk about? Okay, so I can only see half of you. So if you have something, if you're raising your hand, and you are Linda or Suzanne or Tim, I can't see you.
I don't see any hands raised. I'll be your extra set of eyes. I think you're good.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess if we do not have anything for board forum, then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, am I allowed to shout out my stat teacher real fast, who I saw on the personnel committee's list that's going to retire, and I know she sometimes listens to these. So thanks, Ms. Kennedy, for everything.
Thanks, Jimmy.
You just did.
Jimmy, that
You did your shout out. You got it in there.
was nice.
I don't know if she's
Thanks.
watching, but I hope so.
Thanks, Jimmy. That's great. So I
All
think,
right, so a motion to adjourn. Uh-oh.
okay, so I think I saw Jen White first and Suzanne Schaefer second. Did you get that, Mr. McLaughlin?
I did. Thank you.
Okay.
I think we lost Mrs. Gray.
Yes, so
All right,
I'm
yeah,
sure if,
everyone on my screen was frozen. Sorry.
All right, we've got the motion in a second.
So are we all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor?
I could, you got everyone saying that they're in favor, Mrs. Gray, even though you're locking up.
Yeah.
Got it in.
Frozen.
I think we're good. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Aye.
Bye.
Nice
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Thanks,
You too.
everybody.
Thank you.